Health Insurance Consortium to order. I am Rorden Hart. I am your board chair, and I have some remarks which I'll deliver in a moment. But because, as I said, this is an official board meeting, we have a couple of formalities to work through to keep the Department of Financial Services happy, or as close as they get to being happy. The first item is, do we have any changes or additions to the agenda, Elon? And then the next item is we have minutes from our last annual Board of Directors meeting, September 2022, that we need to approve. So I would entertain a motion from a voting member. Thank you, Ronnie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Multiple seconds. Thank you. And for is Lynn here?
Right here.
For Lynn's sake, when you do make a motion or second something during the rest of the meeting, if you could just state your name so that she can record it accurately. So we have a motion and a second to approve last year's annual Board of Directors meeting minutes. Is there any comments or questions or edits? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Great. Well, thank you again. Thank you for attending. I have some folks I want to introduce and then a few remarks to make. As I mentioned, I am your current board chair. I am also the mayor in the village of Trumansburg. I have served in local government since 2007 and on this consortium board since its inception. So it is a pleasure and an honor to be serving as your board chair currently. Other members of our board present, I don't believe Lisa is here. Lisa Holmes from Tompkins County is our vice chair. Steve Thayer from the city of Ithaca, who is also not here. He's on vacation because he thought he would be retired at this point, is our CFO. Judy Drake, who served as our chair for a number of years, is an officer in the position of past chair. And Peter Salton from the village of Huga Heights is our secretary. You'll be hearing quite a bit from Elin Dowd to my left. She's our executive director. And I also want to introduce and thank Terry, Kylie, and Lynn, who are our consortium staff members. They basically keep, as Elin likes to refer to it, some people of a certain generation won't know what this means, but she likes to keep the trains running on time. And so we appreciate all their efforts, and in particular, putting together today's meeting. We have a couple of new members joining us effective January 1. We have the city of Geneva, and in attendance are Amy Hendricks, Jennifer Sluka, and Stephanie Newcomb. So welcome. Those of you local to Tompkins County will remember Amy from her time as our deputy county administrator. So welcome back, I guess, Amy. And from the town of Locke, we have John Carey and Fred Mackey, who I believe are in attendance as well. Welcome to you both. And I also want to make a note and introduce our consultant firm, Losey and Cahill, sitting at the front table here. From Losey and Cahill are Steve Losey himself, Paul Pelton, and Rob Spinard. Losey and Cahill had been the original consultant that the Tompkins County Council of Governments back in 2007, I believe it was, received a grant to hire a consultant to investigate whether a municipal consortium was feasible or not. Up until that point, there had been no other municipal consortium formed in all of New York State for the purposes of administering health insurance. And I believe to date, we are now the only one that has successfully formed. So thank you, Steve, for all the years of assistance, keeping us more or less on the straight and narrow. And Paul and Rob, thank you for being here today. As I mentioned, and this will be a little bit of a personal digression. For some of you, I think, who have a lot of local municipal experience, you will identify with what I'm about to say, and that is, we get into local elected office for a whole host of reasons. Myself, it was something silly and local, but I think that's probably the reason a lot of people get into local government. And over time, if you stay in it long enough, we all learn that there are certain things you can have a meaningful effect on, and much of the time there's a lot of things you can't. And that's where the frustration comes in. That's where lobbying Albany comes in. That's where having a meeting with whoever the congressman of the moment happens to be comes in. But once in a while, Once in a while, you're able to do something or participate in something that has an outsized, meaningful effect on your municipality, on your employees, and on your constituents. Once in a while, you get to do something where you can say, this is a rare and unique example of government doing something really well. We have lots of examples of government doing things not so well. This consortium is, in my opinion, and in my nearly 20 years in local government, the single greatest example of government doing something well that I've ever seen. The original 13 municipalities that formed the original consortium, or the original board of the consortium, by my math, have saved somewhere between $12 and $15 million collectively in health insurance premiums since 2011. That's just something that we can't find anywhere. That's just something that we don't see anywhere else. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it is a privilege on my part, and it is an honor to be able to continue to serve on this board and in this consortium. In that, we have to look at, why is that the case? Why have no other consortiums been formed around the state? What has made our story such a success story? How have we been able to weather a pandemic, even to the point of being able to return or forgive premiums for a particular quarter during 2020? And how are we able to weather what you'll see when you see the financials presented to you is a relatively difficult year in 2023 with respect to claims? How are we able to do that? And what it comes down to is, very simply, the financial strength of this organization. We have had the good fortune of being able to make wise decisions with respect to the money that we have in years where premiums could be reduced less than maybe we have issued. We've been able to have the foresight to say, let's not go to a zero premium increase as much as we might love it at the municipal level. Let's stockpile the money, because sooner or later we're going to have a tough year. That type of foresight, and Steve could probably speak to this at length, that type of foresight is something that is generally not seen in a lot of organizations, and even to the private sector. We have, when an insurance company can, or is forced, in the case of the situation here in New York, where DFS dictates to insurance companies how much they can raise premiums, they are forced into a situation where premiums might be raised 2% one year and 15% the next. And we have the luxury as members of the consortium to be able to work on what is a primary purpose of our organization, and that is rate stability. If I, as a municipal representative, or any of you in this room as municipal reps, could sign on to health insurance premiums that will never go up over a certain amount for the rest of your life, you probably would do it. Even if that means foregoing a year where you see a 0% increase. Because of the unpredictability of the nature of healthcare and of health insurance, that stability, that predictability is really at the core of the mission of this organization. In 2023, with that as a backdrop, we began to look at the executive level. We began to look at, how do we plan? How do we do some strategic planning with respect to trying to ensure some level of stability going forward? We have reserve accounts, which 3 of the 4 of them have guardrails or have rules around how they're used. 2 of them are statutorily required. One of them, in the case of our catastrophic claims reserve, we only recently, within the last year or 2, developed rules for how are we going to use this reserve? How and when are we going to decide to dip into this? And we established rules for that, and it's working very well. You'll hear today, later on in the agenda, we never had rules for our rate stabilization reserve. We did have the good fortune, and I believe the foresight, to establish this reserve several years ago and say, well, someday we're going to have a tough year, so let's put some money away into it. And that number grows, 4 million, 5 million. We're starting to talk about real money, but we had never established rules for when we would use it. We have developed those rules, and we will be asking for your vote in supporting the adoption of those rules later in the agenda. Those rules also come with an expectation of what we should be looking for as far as premium increases go. Every year since our inception, we basically said, well, how did we do this year? How do we budget for next year? Very much a municipal mindset, trying to keep things as low in terms of cost and as manageable as possible. Now that we are a $70 million organization with 64 members from our original 13, it's, I believe, incumbent on us to be able to say, what do things look like 10 years from now? What do things look like 20 years from now? Are we going to be like Nymir, another municipal cooperative that insures themselves and has a long history of success? Or are we going to be like some school district consortiums or others where something happens somewhere in our future where we have to dissolve, where we run into a roadblock either of our own making or of something unforeseen where we can't continue? And so what you'll see when we get to the resolution that we'll be asking you to adopt with respect to the rate stabilization reserve, we're beginning to take that look out into the future as to how we can maintain stability and some predictability for the consortium going forward. We also began in 2023, which should be concluded fairly soon, a premium equivalent rate study that Losi and Cahill will be doing for us. We have had members approach us over time, and increasingly so, asking that we expand our insurance to more than simply a single plan and a family plan. The quote unquote family plan is a holdover, I think, from a time when those were essentially your two most common employee situations. But as all of you know, in this day and age, it could be a single person, it could be a family, or it could be a spouse or domestic partner with no kids. It could be a parent with one or more children that don't fit the legacy standard of a family plan. So we're looking into what does it mean to the consortium from a financial standpoint to begin to offer these other plans, and we will hopefully have some information in the next couple of months for the executive committee to look through. Looking forward to 2024, our strategic planning continues primarily, I think, focused on how do we grow. There is an unfortunate myth that I heard. It was actually a pejorative sent our way by some folks in another county, I won't mention where. And they basically said that the consortium needs to grow by a certain amount in order to be financially stable. The reality is we could close the doors today at 64 municipalities, and given our reserving and given our balances and given our claims history, we would be fine, I believe, for 100 years. Growth, however, gives us an additional advantage in the fact that insurance, and as I'm sure all of you conceptually and inherently know, insurance is all about pooling risk. The more people you have in that pool, the more people you have to spread that risk around, the hopefully less expensive that insurance becomes to any one member. And so given the number of counties, with Livingston County and Monroe County recently being approved to join the consortium, we have the capacity in terms of number of municipalities to have somewhere close to 200 members. I don't know what that looks like. I mean, we've got 64 members and we just made quorum today. If DFS wants us to have an annual meeting where we have a quorum, are we going to be able to get 101 members in a room if we have 200 members? I think that'll be a trick. However, on the flip side of that, if in Central New York, the claims experience is roughly the same and our costs are roughly the same, and we're in the Rochester, Syracuse, Binghamton triangle, that swath of Central New York that runs from, Bath to Oneonta, roughly, we're going to be able to manage our premiums over time much better with the more membership that we have. So being able to strategically plan, how many can we take in a year? Do we, two new members in a year is great. Can we handle 20? Or more correctly, can Elin and the staff handle 20? That's something that we have to look at very closely. We want to be able to manage those risks. Are there any municipalities clamoring to join that maybe are a risk to the organization? We have to be able to balance all of that out. I mentioned the last 12 years of the consortium. We have been blessed. We've been fortunate to have good board members, some with very long tenures in their respective municipalities, and I'm not talking about myself. Part of strategic planning is succession planning. With an organization like this that is largely made up at the board level of electeds, you can only do so much succession planning because elections happen, and I'm sure we all have a crazy election story that we could share. However, we would not be doing our jobs at the executive board level if we didn't at least try to do some type of succession planning with respect to our committee membership, encouraging new members to participate, encouraging longtime members who have never raised their hands for a committee to say, would you please be willing to serve? We are losing a long time, in fact, one of our founding board members to retirement. We are likely to lose one or two more in the next couple of years. And so that regular turnover or regular attrition, if you will, is something that we need to have a plan to backstop. And I'm also a big believer in the 80-20 rule. I fully expect that across any population group or any group of participants, you're going to have about 20% of the folks who are interested enough or have the time, frankly, to commit to an effort. But if you think there's any chance that you might be in that 20%, please talk to Elin, talk to myself. If you have questions, how much of a commitment is it? I'm interested, but I'm interested in this piece, but not that piece. Have that conversation with us, because we are concerned. We do worry about how do we maintain an effective, involved, engaged board, especially at the executive committee level, who can be knowledgeable on all of these issues and help us make these decisions. The last thing I want to mention before turning it over to Elin is, I just mentioned that we're losing a longtime board member. He's not here today. As I mentioned, he's on vacation because he thought he would be retired by June. But as Shelley can tell us, it's the city of Ithaca sometimes is like the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. So I want to read into the record, though he's not here, a resolution of appreciation for Steve Thayer. Steve Thayer is retiring after, I think, 30? Was he there 30?
4.
Long time as the controller in the city of Ithaca. Imagine all that he's seen over that time. And he was one of the original 13 board members on the original consortium board. So this resolution reads as follows. Whereas when the Tompkins County Council of Governments started exploring a municipal cooperative self-funded health insurance program, they were fortunate to have the city of Ithaca Comptroller Steve Thayer involved in the beginning conversations and planning stages of the now Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium. And whereas Steve quickly was named the Chief Financial Officer for the consortium and has served for a long time on the Audit and Finance Committee, both as a member and as a chair. And whereas when some of the city's organized labor groups opposed joining the consortium, Steve successfully championed the idea as a rate-stabilized solution to unpredictable escalating insurance rates. And whereas Steve has been known to attend many meetings and work several hours as a loyal supporter of the consortium, and whereas Steve has been an asset to the consortium with his extensive background in finance, accounting, and municipal law, and is always a pleasure to work with due to his even and calm demeanor. And whereas Steve is now at a stage in life where he can celebrate retirement both from the city of Ithaca as well as the consortium, and whereas Steve has wished much happiness as he steps down and finds time to explore other experiences that bring him joy with his friends and family. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board of directors, staff, consultants, advisors, and associates acknowledge the retirement of Steve Thayer and are appreciative for his many devoted and exemplary years of service. And be it resolved further that on this 21st day of September 2023, the Audit and Finance Committee and the Board of Directors expresses its sincere gratitude to Steve Thayer for his distinguished and dedicated service to the Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium. And I would so move. Do I have a second? All in favor, please say aye. thank you again, everyone, for attending. As I mentioned earlier, quorum is a thing that because we are all made up of municipal members, we do have to abide by open meetings law, which makes it tricky with an organization this size. It is something that I am having conversations with folks in Albany about whether there's any room to amended state insurance law to allow for carve-outs for a one-of-a-kind organization such as this. But until such time as we get the Assembly and the Senate to move on something like that, we will need a quorum for these meetings. So it's I know it's a lot to ask, especially in the middle of the day, but I do appreciate those of you who are able to make it today. I'm going to turn it over now to Elin Dowd. She is our executive director, and she will have a report for us on all things 2023 consortium. Elin.
Thank you, Gordon. And thank you everyone for being here today. It's great to see you all in person. I think I said to someone in the back of the room, it's nice to see your legs for a change. You know, we put ourselves in these little boxes, and it's great to be here together. I'm not going to cover everything in my written report. You can read that report at your leisure if you haven't yet. But I will cover a few things while I'm here and able to do that. If you Google fall and change, the one big thing that keeps coming up, and here we are on the cusp of the fall solstice, is change is beautiful. You know, if you look at fall, that's a great way to look at fall, that beautiful things happen in the fall. I know a lot of leaf peepers end up at my doorstep because they think fall is beautiful. I'm not going to say the changes that we are introducing today are beautiful things, but they are positive changes that I believe, as Warden was talking about, make us a strategic, thoughtful organization looking at the future. And I'll just highlight a few of them, and I'll set up a few resolutions that are coming before you this afternoon. So the first of the three things is improve services. We have added, and at the end of my report, talking about some of the services that as a larger group, we are able to offer to our member municipalities. Medicare Advantage, a group pricing on Medicare Advantage, and as we have more of our municipalities grow into that area, we will have better pricing as time goes on. So that's something new that we are introducing to our municipal members. The other is we're going to be doing COBRA administration for our small member municipalities because they are currently lacking the staffing to be able to remain compliant with COBRA legislation. The other thing, a need came up from our joint committee, is to offer an employee assistance program also with group pricing. So being part of the full membership allows you to have access to some of these additional services that aren't covered under our healthcare program, but able for you to purchase as you feel necessary and the need. And I do want to mention our ongoing customer service in-house, as well as with our other partners who are both here with us today, Excelis and Proact, that we have expedited 1-800 customer service lines, but we also have Kylie Rodriguez. And with your permission, she has been talking directly with employees who have some of those issues that have been difficult for them to have access to the care or access to the care being covered that they should as part of the consortium. And Kylie goes into the labyrinth of hurdles that need to be jumped over to make sure that your employees have the access to the care that they need when they need it. So that's our first area that I wanted to highlight. The second is we're becoming a much more professional organization. It's hard to believe that I'm going to be celebrating my 5th year at the beginning of next year, you know, as the first employee of the consortium. We now have a professional staff, and with a professional staff, we are able to put the policies and the procedures in place that help us keep the trains running on time. I didn't realize I was aging myself when I was saying that, but I won't be using that expression anymore. So as much as the Department of Financial Services audit is killing us, killing Terry, myself, Steve Losey, his team, PROACT's team, Excelis's team, I know when those emails come through from Terry, everyone is like, no, not another one.
There's one waiting for us.
Oh, great, thanks. Don't check your emails while you're in this meeting. But it's really helping us look at how we are organized, how we are running the organization, and what we can do to improve. So when that report comes out, we'll have a lot of suggestions of improvements that we can make together. That's going to require some work from you. So I'm warning you that whenever we receive the exit letter, and we're in, I think, month 11 of the examination, I think it was at the last board meeting, we said we got a letter. So however long this examination goes on, at the end of it, you will need to sign a statement that you have approved all of the proposed changes, but also a response to the audit. So that will be coming, that will require action, resolution, and action on your municipal's standpoint. And then the third thing is we're streamlining operations. We're trying to become an efficient organization. No, we are an efficient organization. We are going to remain an efficient organization. When you look at the budget, administration is still less than 2% of our total budget. And that's even with our brand spanking new office and furniture that we'll be moving into in the next 2 months, we hope. So we're really exciting. We're expanding. We need a professional environment. We're going to be having one, and we're looking forward to that move. But there's going to be some other changes as well. And even though our friends with PROACT are here with us today, and they have been steadfast in their customer service and answering all our concerns, the operations committee is recommending a change. And that is to consolidate both medical and pharmacy benefit claims under the administration of Excelis. We are going to pass a resolution, or a resolution is in front of you today, to help, and that goes back to streamlining our operations. We feel by having that under one roof, some of the technical problems that have been ongoing, like accumulator issues, where if you meet your deductible, you're still being charged extra money and then you're reimbursed by check, or when you go into a pharmacy and you find out that a dependent has mysteriously dropped off. We're hoping that by our recommendation today, we will be able to streamline the offering of those services together, which will cause less confusion. So those are the 3 things that we are working on. There are a few other things that are going to become before you. Our friends at the Department of Financial Services are not always the quickest in getting back to us. So your 2023 municipal cooperative agreement, we just found out a month ago that they wanted to make some changes on it. So those changes are going to come to you immediately after this meeting, and we're going to ask you to pass a resolution at your municipality to approve again the 2023 MCA. The changes are in my written report. So approve those changes. And then right after that, you're going to look at 2024. We have to now send our MCA to DFS prior to you signing it for them to put their stamp of approval. So I'm not sure. We just got 2023 within the last 2 months. I don't know when 2024 is going to come, but we'll be asking you to sign 2024's MCA as well. And then we'll do our usual, we'll send out the code of conduct, which also needs to be signed every year. They did look in our files and make sure that we had signatures from everybody. So they do audit us on all these things, and that's why we pester you for them. There will also be recommendations from DFS on board attendance, on labor representation, filling those empty seats. So we're working on some of those things. So those are just some of the highlights from my executive director report. I think the change is positive, and the change is also so we can continue to offer the services that you want, that you're asking for, that your employees are needing in a rate stabilized environment. So thank you all again for coming today, and I look forward to jumping up here a few more times as we throw in some of those resolutions. Do not trip.
We're just going to keep repeating that all day. Don't trip. Don't trip. Don't trip. You will have noticed by looking at the agenda that there are significant number of resolutions to be considered today. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining each one, although if there is some background, I'll certainly provide it. But I also don't want to give short shrift to anyone who does have questions. If there are questions or comments or concerns about any of the resolutions that we will be covering, this is the time to address those if you so wish. So from the executive committee, we only have one resolution to present to you today. Several years ago, as the consortium grew to a certain size, a number of responsibilities and authorities were delegated to the executive committee. So rather than stacking 75 resolutions to be considered at this meeting every year, a lot of what the consortium does on a month-to-month and day-to-day basis can be handled at the executive committee level. Some things, however, cannot. Standing committees are one of them. In one of our recent audits by DFS, they informed us, although the laws and the rules haven't changed, they decided to wait 12 years to inform us that we should not have a combined audit and finance committee. We should have a finance committee and then a separate audit committee, which I guess makes sense from an accounting standpoint. Why they chose to wait till now to tell us is anybody's guess. In order to split those two committees out effectively into two separate committees, we need this board to authorize that. And so before you today is a resolution which is approval and adoption of a revised executive committee bylaws to include the formation of the audit committee and the finance committee for the Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium. The resolution reads, whereas the executive committee on behalf of the board of directors approved Resolution 012 of 2023, which implemented the dissolution of the audit and finance committee and approved the formation of an audit committee and finance committee. And whereas the consortium continues to grow and improve its structure, there will occasionally be amendments proposed to improve how it functions as an organization. Now, therefore, be it resolved on recommendation of the executive committee that the board of directors hereby adopts the revised executive committee bylaws effective September 21, 2023. Would someone care to move that? Thanks, Gary. Do we have a second? Thanks, Ronnie. Any questions? Again, if there are any questions on any of these resolutions, please don't hesitate to ask. Yes.
Are you gonna staff those committees with the same people that are on the other committees?
Some of them are the same. There's one or two that are slightly different.
I think all of the audit committee are people who volunteered during the survey, or the majority of the audit committee.
So Elin was just mentioning that the audit committee specifically is staffed primarily with people who volunteered for it, specifically in the survey that was sent out a couple of months ago. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the vote on the adoption of the revised executive committee bylaws. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you much. We have a couple of resolutions coming to us from the operations committee. Is Laura here? Hi. Did you want to come up and give any background? There are a couple ports here. So from the operations committee, we have two resolutions for your consideration. One is the, as I scroll,
24. Municipal property.
Yep. This resolution is approval of the 2024 Municipal Cooperative Agreement, or MCA, to include the addition of new participants. Unfortunately, DFS still does require us to ratify the admission of new members every single year. That part makes sense. Requiring every single existing member to vote to approve it. Well, we'll have that conversation in Albany some year. The resolution reads, whereas the Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium is a self-insured municipal cooperative health benefit plan operating pursuant to a certificate of authority issued by the New York State Department of Financial Services pursuant to Article 47 of the New York State Insurance Law. And whereas the GTC MHIC wishes to add new members to the list of participants, and the municipal cooperative agreement will be updated once those members have been approved. Now therefore be it resolved to approve additions of 2024 new members as participants in Section A2 of the 2024 Municipal Cooperative Agreement, and to circulate to all participants for review and approval. Do I have a motion on that one? Scott, thank you. Do I have a second? Thanks, Ed. Any questions on this one? Adding new members for 2024. Seeing no questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this next one is a resolution forwarded to this board by the Operations Committee, which is an authorization to execute an agreement with Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield as the consortium's 2024 pharmacy benefits manager. That resolution is on screen, and I will read it into the record. The resolution reads, whereas Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield provided and presented the Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium's Operations Committee pertinent pharmacy benefit information, which was received and analyzed by the Operations Committee. And whereas the Operations Committee moved motion number 001 of 2023 to advance the pharmacy benefits proposal from Excellus BCBS to the Audit and Finance Committee for recommendation and approval. And whereas the Audit and Finance Committee has gone through the proposal and analysis of the new program and has recommended that the consortium enter into an agreement with Excellus BCBS as pharmacy benefits manager. Now therefore be it resolved on recommendation of the Audit and Finance and Executive Committees that the Board of Directors of the Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium hereby authorizes the chair of the consortium to execute a contract with Excellus BCBS as the 2024 pharmacy benefits manager of the Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium effective January 1, 2024 through December 31, 2024, with the option to renew for 2 successive years. I would entertain a motion to approve that if someone would like to move it. Luann, thank you. Do we have a second? I'm sorry. Janine Bond, thank you.
I have a question,
Yes.
Katie, and who has been doing it before? What was confusing about it?
Proact had been our pharmacy benefit manager for a number of years, and there had been some concerns and issues with respect to some of the service that some of our employees and participant members were receiving. And so we meaning Elin and the staff, had worked with them over the course of really 2022 and the first half of this year to try to, and maybe longer, to try to rectify some of those issues, some of which were improved and some of which weren't. And so in the interest of trying to provide the best possible service to our employees and their family members, we looked at the possibility of making the change, knowing that it's never fun to change, particularly for the end user, with respect to everything from the insurance cards themselves to the service that we hope and expect to receive. And so it was a process to decide whether we make a significant change such as that. But we decided upon seeing what Excelis was offering, that it was time to give them a shot. I will say that personally, I had over the last several years had some hesitancy, and I know this was part of the conversation at the executive committee level. There was some hesitancy with respect to having medical and prescription under the same roof at Excelis. But given some of the issues that we were not able to work through on the service side, particularly to our employees, and I'm thinking of some of the larger municipalities and some of their bargaining units. Somebody lost their GPS signal. I'm in a position where I know, and not because of being mayor, due to my day job, I'm in a position where I have a lot of interaction with a lot of the employees at some of the bargaining units in some of these larger municipalities. And so I get to hear some of the complaints with respect to the service. And of course, Kylie and Terry and Elin and Lynn get to hear it from their end as well. So I think it was a decision made from it's time to try something new. And we're of course not bound to never make a change in the future, but for now it was time.
What will be the metric that you'll follow to determine whether or not the service has been improved?
The number of emails I get going down. I think the ultimate metric is always going to be, well, there's two metrics. One is financial, and the other is the level of service received by the end user. So as a consumer of medicine, as a consumer of pharmacy products, if that individual finds that they are getting requests for pre-authorization approval in situations where they shouldn't need it, if they're finding that the drug that their doctor prescribed, that they have to pay a large copay when their collective bargaining agreement and our plan says they shouldn't, when those stop happening, then we'll know that we found the right place. If that doesn't improve, then everything's up in the air a year or two in the road.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I will call for the vote on authorizing myself as chair to execute an agreement with Excelis as our 2024 pharmacy benefits manager. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you much. Moving on now to the committee formerly known as the Audit and Finance Committee. Judy Drake, our past consortium chair, is the chair of the Audit and Finance Committee, but is she here online?
She is online, but I think they're still giving her the report.
Okay. Judy is online, so thank you, Judy, for attending remotely, but I will give the report, or rather introduce or discuss these resolutions. So the first one is fairly straightforward. We have applications from the towns of Brutus, West Monroe, and Locke, the city of Geneva, and the village of Fairhaven to become participants in the consortium. As is our process, the applications have been reviewed, their financials have been reviewed, and they have been accepted by the various committees. And I will read this resolution into the record. So whereas by resolution number 16 of 2019, the Consortium Board of Directors adopted a policy outlining a process of applying for membership to the consortium. And whereas the towns of Brutus, West Monroe, and Locke, the Village of Fairhaven, and the City of Geneva, having submitted an official application authorizing the joining of the consortium in accordance with the terms and conditions outlined in the municipal cooperative agreement. And whereas these applicants have complied with membership process and have submitted copies of financial reports, which have been evaluated by the finance manager and or the CFO. And whereas the City of Geneva will be bringing age 65 plus retirees who are already enrolled on a Medicare plan. And whereas section A5 of the 2022 amendment to the municipal cooperative agreement clarifies that retirees, or clarified rather, retirees in relation to the MCA, and states that participation in the medical plans by some but not all collective bargaining units or employee groups of a participant shall not be permitted without a board approved waiver. And whereas in the application process, the City of Geneva requested an additional 3-year extension with the GTC MHIC to be waived of compliance with section A5 of the consortium's 2023 MCA effective through December 31st, 2027. Now therefore be it resolved on recommendation of the Audit and Finance Committees that the Board of Directors hereby accepts and welcomes the towns of Brutus, West Monroe, and Locke, the Village of Fairhaven, and the City of Geneva as municipal participants in the consortium with health insurance coverage beginning January 1, 2024, pending receipt, additional analysis, and approval of all required documentation. And be it further resolved, the City of Geneva will receive an additional 3-year extension with the GTC MHIC to be waived of compliance with section A5 of the consortium's 2023 MCA effective through December 31st, 2027. And I would entertain a motion to move that resolution.
So moved. Salton.
Scott beat you to it. Peter with a second. Any questions? Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Welcome. On the other side of that coin, we have a resolution to accept the withdrawal of the town of Onondaga as a participant in the consortium and to be omitted from the 2024 MCA. And I'll just read this very quickly. There's no quickly with this one, so I'll just read it. Whereas by resolution number 5 of 2012 and amended by resolution number 27 of 2014, the Consortium Board of Directors adopted a policy outlining a process of applying for membership to the consortium. And whereas the town of Onondaga submitted an official resolution authorizing the town to join the consortium in accordance with the terms and conditions outlined in the MCA. And whereas on recommendation of the Audit and Finance Committee of the consortium, the Board of Directors accepted and welcomed the town of Onondaga by resolution number 24 of 2022 as a municipal participant with health insurance coverage beginning January 1 of 2023. And whereas immediately after being approved for membership by the Board of Directors and therefore included as a member in the 2023 MCA, but prior to enrollment in the plan or commitment through signing of the MCA, the town of Onondaga notified the consortium that they would be withdrawing their application and would not enroll effective January of 2023. And whereas the consortium has not considered the town of Onondaga a current participant, and also has not considered or will not consider any future events of insurance claims for the town. And whereas the consortium will prepare the 2024 MCA to exclude the town for the future unless the town of Onondaga submits a new application. Now therefore be it resolved on recommendation of Audit and Finance and Executive Committees that the Board of Directors hereby authorizes the consortium to withdraw the town of Onondaga as a participant of the consortium, and the town of Onondaga will be omitted from the 2024 MCA. That's just a lot of words that basically says they asked to join, they were accepted, but then they never actually joined. So per the DFS, we have to formally remove them, otherwise we're including them. And thank you, DFS, for making us do that. So I would entertain a motion to accept that resolution as presented.
Or agree.
Or with the motion, do we have a second? Thanks, Mike. Any questions or comments?
I do have, I think it would be best for us to do a friendly amendment. Now that DFS has asked us to redo 2023 to wherever it says 2024 to include 23 and 24. Because they will not be in the 23.
All right, Laura, would you accept a friendly amendment to add 2023 MCA as well as 2024 MCA? To remove the town of Onondaga from both? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then all in favor of accepting the resolution as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next up, we have a similarly wordy resolution to accept the withdrawal of the town of Niles as a participant. I believe they only have the one. Is that one? They only have the one.
Yeah, dropped off in Tuesday.
So the town of Niles had only one employee who was insured by the consortium, and they have since moved to a Teamsters health plan. So they have no employees eligible for us to cover. So I'll read this into the record quickly, that whereas by resolution number 5 of 2012 and amended by resolution 27 of 2014, the consortium board adopted a policy outlining the process of applying for membership. Whereas the town of Niles submitted an official resolution to join the consortium in accordance with the terms and conditions outlined in the MCA. Whereas the Audit and Finance Committee accepted and welcomed the town of Niles as a municipal participant in 2019. And whereas the town of Niles has since notified the consortium that they no longer would like to be a municipal participant effective immediately. And whereas the town of Niles is listed in our 2023 MCA. And whereas per their request, the consortium will not be considering any future events of insurance claims for the town of Niles for 2023. Therefore, be it resolved on recommendation of the Audit, Finance, and Executive Committees of the Board of Directors hereby authorizes the consortium to withdraw the town of Niles as a participant in the consortium immediately, and the town of Niles will be omitted from the 2024 MCA. Would someone like to move that? Gary in the back, Ed with a second. Thank you both. Any questions?
I'm sorry.
Gary and Ed.
Third whereas you mentioned kind of one.
Yeah, I read right through that. Okay. One edit. Any other questions or edits? Hearing none, and all in favor of adopting this resolution as edited, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving right along, we have the formality of acceptance of our 2022 external audit report performed by Insero and Company. We do receive, or we do have, an annual audit of our finances done by Insero as our auditing company. And the resolution simply reads that whereas one of the responsibilities of the consortium board of directors is to audit receipts and disbursements of the consortium and provide for independent audits and periodic financial and operational reports to participants in accordance with New York Insurance Law, Section 4705E1. And whereas New York Insurance Law, Section 4705E1 includes the following provisions: that the municipal cooperation agreement shall provide for the following to be prepared and furnished to the governing board, to participating municipal corporations, to unions, which are the exclusive bargaining representatives of employees covered by the plan, and to the superintendent. 1, an annual audit and opinions thereon by an independent certified public accountant of the financial condition, accounting procedures, and internal control systems of the municipal cooperative health benefit plan. And 2, an annual report and quarterly reports describing the plan's current financial status. And whereas the board of directors entered into a contract for auditing services with Insero and Company for the purpose of conducting an annual audit of the consortium's financial records for fiscal year 2022, now therefore be it resolved on recommendation of the Audit and Finance Committee that the 2022 annual audit report prepared and presented to the Audit and Finance Committee by Insero and Company is hereby accepted. Would someone like to move that? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ed, thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, last resolution from Audit and Finance, and this one, if there are questions, I'm certainly happy to entertain them. This establishes what I alluded to at the beginning of the meeting. With respect to our rate stabilization reserve, it establishes rules for how and when it will actually be used, as opposed to just being a large sum of money sitting in the bank without any rules attached to it. It also does establish for the very first time a target, and it's only a target because really any future board could change this, but it's a target with respect to what we are expecting or anticipating or planning to budget for with respect to future premium increases. And so I'll read the resolution and then hope to get a motion and a second, and then we can certainly discuss, or I can answer questions on it. So whereas resolution number 19 of 2014 adopted the 2015 budget and established a rate stabilization reserve at 1.64 million to, quote, protect the cash flow position of the consortium should there be a year when claims costs exceed the prediction, end quote. And whereas the rate stabilization reserve was updated to be funded at 7.5% of annual premiums with resolution number 34 of 2019. And whereas it is the desire of the Audit and Finance Committee to define when and how the rate stabilization reserve should be utilized and subsequently refunded. And whereas it is the desire of the Audit and Finance Committee to refer to said resolution on an annual basis or when deemed necessary during the yearly budget process, and shall approve any revisions by formal resolution. Now therefore be it resolved that on recommendation of the Audit and Finance Committee and the Executive Committee that the Board of Directors authorizes the establishment of an annual premium increase target of 4% to 8%. And be it further resolved that resolution number 34 of 2019 is amended to set a target for the rate stabilization reserve of 10% of annual premiums. And be it further resolved that when budgeted premium increases exceed 8%, a budget will be developed that funds the rate stabilization reserve at a level less than the 10% of premium target, but not lower than 2.5% of premium level, with a goal of meeting all other budget requirements as outlined in resolution number 15 of 2020. And be it further resolved that when the rate stabilization reserve is funded below the 10% of premium target, the budget that is developed as a result will be created to support returning to the 10% of premium target funding level in subsequent years and as quickly as possible. And be it further resolved that on behalf of the Audit and Finance Committee and the Executive Committee, that the Board of Directors authorizes the consortium to set an annual premium increase target and utilization of the rate stabilization reserve as listed. And I would entertain a motion to adopt that resolution. You got your choice. Yeah, you got Ronnie for the second.
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second. Any questions on this one? Questions or comments or explanation? I really thought this was the one I was going to get a lot of questions on. No, yeah.
What type of investments are you allowed or disallowed?
Great question. So because we are municipally, our members are all municipalities, we're bound by general municipal law, is it Article 5, I think, with respect to what we can invest in. So that's government treasuries, government mortgage backs, CDs, bank accounts, money markets, AAA rated. I think we could go as far as AAA rated corporate paper, but no stocks or anything like that. Currently, we use a third-party fund manager. Their portfolio is almost entirely treasuries. We have a formal investment policy that allows for some flexibility in that. Now that interest rates aren't zero, it's probably not going to be necessary to chase the riskier stuff, even if we wanted to, which we really don't. And I haven't seen our returns year to date on a percentage basis from Wilmington Trust, which is the fund manager. But with interest rate, I mean, you can get 4.5% to 5% in an online savings account now. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to earn in that neighborhood going forward.
A question, Chad Hayden, why do we need to increase the rate stabilization reserve by $200,000?
Yeah, hopefully it'll be more than that over time. The thought is this. So our lowest premium increase in our history, I believe, was 3%, and we've averaged about 6%. So from a rate stability standpoint, if we look at, and this is in conversations with Losi and Cahill as well, and what is the experience of their much larger book of business, you know, if we could maintain really 5% to 8% over time for premium increases, that would really, I think, be a fantastic level of stability. We lowered it to 4% to give us some wiggle room if we have a really great year and everything is overfunded, then we can have a lower premium increase. With that said, you'll see when we show you this year's budget, without the rate stabilization reserve, we would be seeing a premium increase larger than 8% this year. And that's just because of the claims experience that we've had this year. Blue Cross Blue Shield in the private sector, they have to get approval from New York State. They petitioned for a 12.5% premium increase, and they got it. Basically, they're getting to do 12%. Some of the smaller group plans I'm aware of are going up 15% to 16%. So just in case we find ourselves as an organization staring at a 12% increase, and we want to get that back down to 8%, the fund that we dip into to offset that is going to have to be bigger over time. So the difference between 7.5 and 10 isn't large on a percentage basis, but over time, especially as the consortium grows, you know, when we are a $100 million organization instead of a $70 million organization, which could happen in the next 5 to 7 years, 10%, you know, it's $2.5 million difference between the 7.5 and 10. So we really want, if we want rate stability, we really want the stabilization reserve fund to be as robust as possible. I could see, because this is sort of what I do for a living on the future planning side, I could see me advocating for 12.5% at some point. But for now, 10% is A, it's a nice round number. B, it feels from a math standpoint like it should be enough to weather a really bad year going forward, unless and until sometime in the future our claims experience says otherwise.
So there's a belief that the risks are increasing.
There's a belief that we want to make sure we have the ability, if we want to target stability. And of course, this 4% to 8% number is a moving target as well. But if we want to target that range, and we've experienced the low end of it for most of the last decade, we want to make sure that we can withstand an outlier event to the tune of 15% to 16% increase in a wild year. You know, we've really been fortunate when it comes to, and I don't have a good theory, actually I do have a theory, I don't know if it's a good one, as to why our claims experience is so good. It could simply be the age and demographic of people who choose to work for municipalities being relatively more healthy than maybe the general population. I don't know. But we need to be able to withstand, you know, the so-called black swan event. We need to be able to withstand the outlier event. And I don't think smaller, the conclusion is that smaller rate stabilization funding doesn't give us enough backup if we do face something outside of our current experience.
So this is a gut reaction. It's not a measurable.
Sure. I think the move from 7.5 to 10 is more based on the new desire to target the premium increase amount. If we were basically saying that we will use the rate stabilization on an ad hoc or discretionary basis, then we may not need to fund it as much if we're willing to accept the 11% increase in a given year. But because we're narrowing the range of what we want to accept in a normal premium increase range, we're narrowing that to 4 to 8. We're now targeting a larger backup. And that will be something we may have to adjust experientially if we find that that's not enough. I think 7.5 is not enough. I think 10 should be, and we will have to adjust that if that proves to be not the case. Yeah. Do you want to add something?
I was just gonna say, as far as the first part of your question with, risk, are we feeling additional risk? When we get to the Losi and Cahill presentation, we'll just see that overall, the cost of claims are trending higher. And we'll see that in the presentation, so we want to make sure that we are able to weather the cost of claims expand.
Yeah, from a risk management standpoint, I mean, the reality is we all know health care costs are going up and health insurance costs are going up. So from a risk management standpoint, I would rather, or whoever the next chair is, I would rather have them be in the position 7 or 8 years from now of saying, we really overfunded this rate stabilization reserve. We'll never need the 10%. Let's reduce it. I would rather have that be the case than have us in 2025 or 2026. After you see this year's numbers, if we have multiple high claims years, I'd rather not be in a position where we have to say we didn't fund things enough to be able to maintain rates stable between 4 and 8%. Any other questions, comments?
I have one, Peter Salton. I was probably the one that asked the most questions about this while we were crafting it. And I think it's very important to realize that we can always open up this resolution and change it. There is language in there that allows us to do that. And I wanted to make sure that it was in there. I believe also that this consortium is at an inflection point where we're getting different members from different places. And we're not big. We're only a few high-risk claims away from really having to dip into these reserves and to stabilize ourselves. So it's highly important that we have enough to weather 10 horrible claims, because that's, we're 10 horrible claims away from probably having a different discussion in here where we don't have that many covered lives. So, these are the kinds of things that we have to be more and more careful of, not less and less. And we don't have the same scale as Excellus does in order to weather that risk. So, I think we've done the best we can, in my opinion, anyway. And I was pretty vigorous about this. I was not quiet. So I think we've got a nice resolution here, and I can certainly support it.
Thank you, Peter, a man who needs no microphone. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Looking at what the plan is actually covering and looking at and I worry about places that have small budgets and much like this. Is there ever an effort to say craft another plan that would be a more affordable?
There's a lot in that question. So the plans themselves, and I don't want to get too far out into the weeds on this, but the plans themselves are either a function of definitions provided in the Affordable Care Act, if we're talking about the so-called metal level plans, or they're a function of collective bargaining. And the consortium has, for the most part, I think, done a fairly good job of trying to be as agnostic as possible with respect to what an employer chooses to offer their employees or bargains with a unit. So especially in the larger municipalities, if a municipality is trying to shoehorn their, bargaining unit X into a particular plan, that's their prerogative, and it's the union's prerogative to push back on that, and whatever they result in Our job as a consortium is to provide that coverage. I don't, switching hats here for a minute, putting on the municipal hat. I wouldn't want an organization that I'm a member of telling me what I can offer village employees. So we have to be careful how we walk that line. And I think generally speaking, I think we've done a pretty good job with that. With respect to covering, how the plans are constructed, we are handcuffed by the ACA when it comes to the metal level plans. And I think the majority of the consortium is moving in the direction of offering one of those plans. And then they're basically defined by law as to what is covered. The employer can then decide how much of that cost do they want to cover and how much do they want to share. So when we see high cost claims, it's really a function of health care, not health insurance. And when people have the unfortunate health event that results in 2 or 3 years in a row of claims approaching $1 million, that's really what health insurance is for, right? I have this argument sometimes with folks. I don't think health insurance should always cover my doctor's office visit for my kid with a cold. Health insurance is really for the catastrophic, in theory. And then of course we bargain away, and it is a benefit to people to be able to manage their own personal cash flow. So the short answer to your question is, when we see high cost claims, we're always monitoring them from a budget standpoint, making sure we're well reserved. I think the catastrophic claims reserve has done a really good job since we defined how we use it in covering some of those incidents. And then the employer, is always going to be looking at what is cost effective to them as a municipality, and what do they want to offer, what can they offer. And so in the situation where we see premium increases that pinch a municipal budget, that does two things. It means that municipality will have to decide for themselves and for their employees what they want to be able to cover. And then it also makes this 4 to 8% target very important. If we're able to maintain this target, if our experience and our reserving allows us to hit that number, or that range in this case, then it gives you at the municipality the ability to better budget for those swings. Any other questions on this one? Going once. All right, I'll call for a vote then on this resolution, which establishes an increased target for the rate stabilization reserve and a newly formed target for future premium increases. If someone would like to move it.
Sure, then you do it.
My apologies. We had the motion in the second already. And so I will call for a vote on this as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Before we get to the resolution to adopt our budget, I'm going to have, who's coming up?
We're both gonna come up.
Steve and Paul from Losi and Kale are both going to come up and give a presentation on the budget itself. You'll get to see how the budget was actually constructed, see what we're looking at for 2024.
Thanks, Vernon. Paul's going to get into the nuts and bolts of the report. I just wanted to make a couple quick comments before we get started, especially for those of you who are pretty new to this process. Being on the board of directors, it's grown quite a bit. As Warden mentioned, Losi and Kale has been involved with this consortium since its inception, and quite honestly before its inception, when it was just an idea with the Tompkins County Council of Governments. They were trying to achieve two things at the time, if I remember correctly. One was health insurance, and the other was, I think, dog warden or something. We fixed the health insurance. We never did. I don't think they ever did get to the dog warden thing, but yeah, we're quite proud of this consortium. It is the only consortium in New York State, as Warden mentioned, that has been formed from the ground up since Article 47 was passed in New York State back in 1993. So you should take great pride in the fact that you're the only municipal consortium that's gotten off the ground and is successful. We've grown from 13 municipalities to 64 currently, with another 5 being added. With the 564 total. So from 13 to 65 total, it's amazing. Your number one job as board of directors is to manage the financial operations of this program. From day one, we promised a couple of different things with regards to the consortium when we were looking at the development. The first thing was we were going to try to bring rate stability. So our goal is to try to keep the rates manageable and modest every single year as best we can. Obviously, we're affected by outside influences. Some of those influences are benefits that we're mandated to provide. As Warden was talking about with the different benefit designs, there was a question about that. What can we offer? We have a lot of state mandates, federal mandates that we have to adhere to. Basically, the state looks at this group as an insurance company. So they manage you just like a not-for-profit insurance company. So everything that the consortium does, from benefit plans to financial management to its day-to-day operations, is really being managed from that perspective. So it really does kind of pigeonhole us in terms of what benefits we can offer. However, we do have about 26 different benefit plans today that are being utilized throughout the consortium. Most small employers, if you're out in the open market, you're limited to basically 4 different levels of benefit. There's a platinum plan, a gold plan, a silver plan, and a bronze plan. And within those different levels, there may be slightly different options, but for the most part, those are the same. We offer those as well as many other programs. But one of the things that you're going to see in this year's budget presentation, yes, we have gone through a little bit of hyperinflation with regards to claims. Paul's going to go through a lot of information about that. It's really twofold, some of the problem associated with it. Some is just general market conditions. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of the hospitals and physician groups had to kind of get back up to speed. People were getting things done a little bit quicker. We had some compression as a result of that. Some physician groups and hospitals have renegotiated their contracts with insurance carriers, which obviously drives up price. And then on top of that, we're starting to see a smaller and smaller segment of the population eating up more and more of the cost. So we're seeing a lot more catastrophic claims, and Paul will go through some of this data in the presentation as well. But those are all things that are kind of weighing on the consortium. And one of the reasons why years ago, when we had the funds, we built those reserves. We made sure and set aside some money for catastrophic claims, for rate stabilization. Now we're going to use some of it this year, but as Warden said, when we get a couple of years down the road, things are cyclical. We'll have a good year at some point. We'll be able to replenish some of those reserves, maybe even build a little bit more. We just have to have the patience to know that what we're doing is long term. This is not a year-by-year solution. This is a decade-by-decade solution. And that's really what we're trying to manage from a financial perspective. And with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Paul to go through the 2024 budget. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about that, especially those of you who are new to the process. So thanks.
Okay, while we have 64 slides here, I do try to promise that I'll move through them quickly, but slowly enough where you understand everything we're talking about. Before we get into this year's financial status, I think this year's financial status really sets up the budget. So we want to start on page 3 and just give you an idea of the things we think about when we're putting together a budget proposal. We have 5 principles that we consider each year when we put together the budget. We have a net income goal, our statutory reserve funds, which is IBNR, and our surplus reserve. And then the rate stabilization reserve fund, we talked about the catastrophic claim reserve and our fund balance target. If you move over to the next slide, I'm just going to keep moving with Terry here. Okay, our net income goal. Each year we try to set a budget that has about a 2% net income where our revenues exceed our expenditures. And the reason we do that is our reserve funds are a product of taking a percentage of our claims or our premium income. So to have those reserve funds increase with the budget as it increases annually, you need to have a little bit of surplus money each year. Ironically, when you look at this year's budget proposal, we're not going to have a net income. We're actually going to utilize a bit of fund balance, but we're going to give you that long-range financial plan and explain why we're doing that. The statutory reserve fund, the IBNR reserve, that's a product of 12% of all of our anticipated paid claims, including hospitalization, medical, surgical, and any pharmacy claims. So we look at what we expect to pay on claims, multiplied by 12%, and that's a statutory reserve fund for any run out of claims that happens at the end of the year following the claims. Our surplus account is a product of taking 5% of our expected earned premium income each year. So as you can imagine, as the budget grows each year, that 5% number gets a little larger, and that's why we typically target to have a net income each year as we build the budget. Again, this year being a little different. On our catastrophic claims reserve, that's a product that the board adopted. And basically what we did is we initially funded that reserve fund at $4.5 million. The way we fund that reserve fund is when we buy stop loss insurance each year, we get 2 quotes from our stop loss providers. One for a $600,000 deductible policy, one for $1 million deductible policy. Obviously, the higher deductible, the cheaper the policy. We budget for a $600,000 policy, deductible policy, but then we purchase the $1 million policy. That gives us a gap in our budget, and that money is utilized to seed money into the catastrophic claim reserve. Where that's important is each year, if we don't hit a $1 million deductible number for an individual, but we have claims that exceed 500,000, not the 600,000 deductible, that allows the group to move money out of that catastrophic claims reserve to soften the blow on the budget that year. So if we have a claim that's $550,000, we'll move $50,000 out of the catastrophic claims reserve into the budget to help soften the blow. So we're constantly feeding that budget or that catastrophic claims reserve with the surplus in the budget line item, which you'll see when we get into the details. The rate stabilization reserve that you just amended right now is at 7.5% of all claim payments, excuse me. So now that we're looking at this, you're going to see in the budget process, in the long range financial plan that we're doing, that we actually are taking that number down to 2.5% with a goal of getting it up to that 10% threshold. But you're going to see over some long range financial planning, we're going to give you 5 years of data. Even though we're only focusing on 2024, we do a 5-year estimate of pro forma out 5 years as long range financial planning is critical in an organization this size. And again, the fund balance target. Again, the keyword target. We would like to see a 12% undesignated fund balance every year at the end of the year. For really, that's that little nest egg that is over and above when we have the high claim years like we have this year. And you're going to see what we mean high claims years, a little bumpy. Today we got a great news week. It was a much smaller than the past half dozen weeks in claims. So this week was a good week, but it's been a bumpy year so far. Okay, on slide 11, we're going to give you the status right now of, there we go. We're going to work through where we are this year, what the budget was this year, and how that impacts what we're doing for next year and the percentages increase that we're proposing. Right now, through August 31st on the revenue side, we're really pretty tight on budget. We're about 0.67% below budget on revenue income. A lot of that's due to our premium income. What happens, right now it's September, we're building our budget for 2024. We're building it based on the plans and the contracts that are in place right now as of today. And then what will happen in February, we amend that budget based on the new members. So we're looking at just who we have right now under contract, how much income. The same thing happened when we were building the 23 budget. We built it based on the plans that were in place at that time. And there's been some movement out of higher cost premium plans into lower cost premium plans. So it creates a little bit of a shortfall. But the nice piece with that, typically, that will result in lower claims also, because when you change the benefits of a plan, the claims it pays also would go down with the premium. Not so much the case this year because of some larger losses, and we'll talk about that a little bit. One of the other large revenue items, this year we've received so far $2.378 million in RX rebate income. The way that it works right now is our pharmaceuticals, we're able to get RX rebates based on that from the prescription manufacturers. And it would be much simpler if they would just simply lower the price of the drug. But that's not the game right now. So what we have to do is we have to work with our administrators, ProAct and soon to be Excelis, to try to drive the best RX rebate programs that we possibly can to drive those revenues back to the group. The reason that's so important is if we don't have those RX rebate dollars, that's additional money that you'll need to raise in premium income. So our job as a consultant is to work with the administrators, to work with Greater Tompkins County to drive that RX rebate number up to the highest minimum guaranteed rebates possible. Interest income has been a challenge. Until this year, for the past several years, has been basically little to no interest income available. With the market conditions improving after COVID, we're starting to see some better returns on investments, and you're going to see in the budget that number's gone up even significantly a little bit more. We can move over to the expenditure side. On slide 14, there we go. On the expenditures of the group, right now, we're about 2.41% over budget. As you can see on the claim lines highlighted in red there, it's a little small there, so let me just read them out to you. On the medical claims, we're about $400,000 over budget at the current time through August. That's about 1.37%. Really, that's not bad. You're going to have years that ebb and flow. On the RX side, we're about 1.3 million over budget, 10.35% over budget. What's kind of interesting in that is on the RX side, we have 10 particular claimants that equal about $1.67 million. The cost of RX drugs continues to escalate at a pretty rapid pace. And in those 10 claimants, we have 9 that have prescription drugs fills through over $100,000, and we have 1 that is over $450,000. So some of these people get into that large loss report that we talk about in catastrophic claims report. And what's important to know is that could be any group, any person, anytime. We were in a meeting yesterday with another group that had 94 large losses over $100,000. And I found it ironic that half of those were children. So you kind of think, okay, you get an older population that has larger claims, more medical issues. Not so the case. Of that 94, 47 were actually youth, children. So again, there's no hard set reason on who it is, when it is, or where it is. Ironically, less than 1% of the people in the plan are accounting for 15% of the claims right now. If you look at the top lines, ending with a specific stop loss insurance right below the orange shaded lines, which are New York State tax and our affordable care taxes, that accounts for about 98.5% of the budget. So if you look at the other lines, they're pretty much right on budget, mostly below budget. And I don't want to minimize the importance of them, but I also will talk about that in the budget process. But that only accounts for 1.5% of your total budget. That's your in-house administrative staff. That's your consultants, your attorneys, office fees. In this particular budget, there's a little more expenditures for furniture, equipment for the new building. That's like a one-time expenditure. That number drops off in the budget process. While very important, it does also demonstrate the efficiency of this group. The in-house staff, very lean, very tight, running a very good program, but the vast majority of your money is going towards claims to pay benefits for your members. That's an efficient organization, and you should be very proud of that. Let's move on to slide 17 and just give you some visuals. That's a little easier to look at. When you're skipping these slides, I'm trying to articulate this the best I can. I don't want to read slides to you. I know how that is in a presentation. So when you're seeing verbiage go by on the screen, hopefully I'm covering most of those topics when we're talking today. This slide just gives you a budget versus actual, with the blue bar being the budget amount and the red bar being the actual. Everything looks really, really good, except on the bottom line, which is the paid claims, which we just talked about. Again, remembering that 10 claimants alone were $1.67 million, which fully exceeds the amount that we're over budget. Now, again, it's not their fault. It's just a way it is. You have high drug costs for cancer patients, cystic fibrosis, those type of medications. They just draw a lot of money. And this year, the interesting piece is these are kind of what I call chunky claims. They're big claims, but they're not enough to draw stop loss insurance. Because remember, you only get any type of reimbursement if you exceed $600,000. So all of these claimants are below the $600,000 threshold. So even though we buy that stop loss insurance, we're not getting any refund back from our stop loss carrier because we haven't exceeded the $600,000 threshold for any million. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Million. Yes, the 600 is the bottom line for the deductible. Thank you very much. Said that three times, didn't I? Okay. Slide 18. Just to give you a good look, and I think this is the best demonstration of where our claims are going. You'll see that almost 95% of our money, again, going out to paid claims. Under 3% is actually the administration fee. And then with about 0.5% for stop loss insurance, and the rest of the book of business for everything for us, administrative fees, consultant fees, all of their office fees, really about 2% or a little bit less. Moving on to slide 19, you just see a look at our covered lives and our contract counts. As you see those sharp jags up just before the end of the right side of the chart, that's where we bring on new groups. So that's the beginning of the year. This year, we increased our new contracts and covered lives by about 9.6%. And remember, when we built the budget last year back in September, October, and finalized that budget, we did not include those contract counts in that budget, but we amend that budget in February, early February, to make that adjustment for premium income, claims projections, and all other administrative fees. So this budget, when we get to the budget slides, that's going to be based on just the current contracts and groups we have. And going to slide 21, just to give you that visual, the medical claims, obviously, like I said, 1.37, that looks okay. You know, we're right on the line. But on the bottom line, where you see the RX, you're starting to see a little gap grow. Now, you like to see that gap grow if the red line was below the green line, but right now it seems to be trending about 10.3% above budget. The next slide will show you if we combine those, which kind of softens it a little bit, because right now medical claims are a larger portion of your claim history. So when you combine medical and RX claims, we're about 4.02% above budget. And the next slide just gives you a monthly take a look at it, showing where we budget and where we fell every month. Some weeks are different. You'll see spikes in March, June, August, and November. Those are just Excellus bills on a weekly basis. Some months have 5 weekly bills, some have 4 weekly bills. So that explains those ups and downs. Which on the next slide also explains some of the peaks and valleys on these charts. Again, when you look at that top bar, and I'm not quite sure what color that is, a brownish orange, that's the current fiscal year. Now, you would expect that to be above all the others because we added 9.6% in members and contracts, but we are a little above that because of the claim history that's coming in a little high this year. And the next chart is a growing bar chart where it just shows where we are fiscal year to date, actual versus budget, the orange and red bars being the RX, the black and blue bars being the medical drugs. The interesting piece to look at is we really, if you look at the RX bar starting at the bottom, we really had actual numbers for the most part that were below budget from 2017 to 2019, right about on budget in 2020. 21, 22, and 23, that RX drug is starting to grow a little bit. You don't know if that's really COVID driven. Are there more mental health issues since COVID that has driven that RX piece? You know, it's something that's hard to identify and put your finger on. But again, a trend that no less is, deserves a little bit of attention, and you're going to see that in the 24 budget. The medical claims have really taken care of themselves. If you look at 2019 and 2020, those we consider COVID years. And what happened during the COVID years, your medical claims really got compressed because not as many people were going to the doctor. There wasn't a huge impact on the RX side. And then 21, you'll see that, okay, people started going back to the doctor. And we had a conservative budget year and a good budget year medical claims wise in 2022. And this year, the 1.37% above budget. Overall, in the next slide, going back to 2011, when you look at our actual versus budget, what we've done with this group, we've actually had a margin of about negative 2.98%, which is pretty tight over that period of time. What that chart's showing you that medical claims and RX claims, budget versus actual, we've actually come within 3% of the target to the good side. This year, as they've talked about, and Riordan and Elin and Steve mentioned, a little bit bumpy on the other side. Earlier in this year, that was a hair over 3%, but it's kind of retracted a little bit, and we're down under 3% variance for that long period of a time. Okay, we're about halfway home there. So that's where we stand this year financially on the revenue and expense side, and we'll show what that means fund balance wise in a little bit. But what we want to do is show you now how that drives into our budget development. So for 2024. We just want to quickly hit a couple of definitions, and I'm not going to read these to you, but just go over what the major income categories are for the group. Obviously, the main income source is medical premiums, medical and RX premiums. We'll give that information of what the budget recommendation is in just a moment. We have interest earnings, and you're gonna see in 2024 that the projection for interest earnings is up significantly. As Rorden mentioned, we work with Wilmington Trust to help manage our investments, and next year's looking good, so we have a good positive number there. We also have RX rebates, which is a large source of income. 2024, we'll be moving to the new PBM agreement. But what's important to realize about that is there's like a 6-month lag on getting the rebates for a particular quarter. So next year's 2024 budget is going to be half from the previous agreement, which was also very healthy, and then half from the new agreement. So we'll get the last 2 quarters of 2023 will be paid in the first 2 quarters of 2024. The first 2 quarters of 24 are going to be paid in the last 2 quarters of 24. So it's kind of a mixed bag for the 2024 budget. And then we have stop loss reimbursements. That's a tricky one. We don't ever budget anything for stop loss reimbursements because you never know if you're going to get them. Again, this year with $1 million deductible, we haven't exceeded the $1 million deductible at all yet. Matter of fact, our highest claimant, I believe, was $444,000. So we're a ways away from hitting that $1 million target. As I talked about, if that claimant gets over $500,000, we may start tapping into that catastrophic claims reserve to help supplement the budget a little bit. But again, to get any money back from the stop loss carrier, claims would have to exceed $1 million. Other income, sometimes there's performance guarantees in contracts. So when you get money in these areas, you're not real happy about it because it means your administrator is probably not doing a good job and not hitting some of their target areas. Customer service, time it takes to answer the phone, filling prescriptions accurately. All those type of things are things that will cause them to possibly have to give you back some of what they call performance guarantees. So getting $0 in there from PROACT or getting $0 from there from Excellus is a great thing. It's a line item we don't budget because obviously we hope that things are running as efficiently as possible. Now we're going to get into the budget numbers. What we have on this slide, if you look at the left side with the purple colored heading, this is in sync with the Insero budget that you approved today and accepted today. So this is going to tell you what our starting point was. Last year, we received $57.8 million in revenue. When we did the 2023 budget, we had $61.759 million, and $58 million of that was in premium income. And then, as I talked about, we amended the budget in February, and we moved that up to bring on the new members that added the 9.6 contracts, 9.6%. And the premium income went up to $62 million, 65.45 overall in revenues. Then our projected estimated actual. As we talked about, as of August 31st, we're currently experiencing a small shortfall in premium income. And again, that's some of our current plans that were where they were when we built the budget versus where they are now. A lot of those people may be moving to a platinum product, which is cheaper premium. So we have a little bit of a deficit. So there's where we build off of. We take what we actually think we're going to get for 2023, and we increase that by the recommendation of 8% for next year, giving us a budgeted income of $66,280,000. Again, if you look at the rebates, last year we received $3.2 million. This year we budgeted 2.9. We're projecting to get roughly 3.3. And then moving out into the next year, about 3.9 million, 3.87 million. Again, remembering the 24 is half of the old program and half of the new program, or yes, the new program. A little water, maybe it gets a chance. Get a little dry. So. Okay, slide 31. So I think it's very important. You know, we're only focused on 2024, but as we mentioned in one of the first slides, it's important to look long-term. You can't manage a program this big with so many variables and only look at this year only. That's how you get trapped. So we do build a 5-year pro forma, and I'll talk a little bit when we get to the expenditure side of how we trend claims, both medical and RX. Thank you. That's good. Okay, so when we look at it, when we go off 4 years, and these percentages, this is why I hate to show this slide, because everybody's going, oh my God, it's going to be 7.75, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5 for the next years. Those are nowhere near set in stone. We could have a fantastic year next year, and then we're going to probably be looking at that rate stabilization reserve in that 4% to 8% range. Where are we going to fall in there? But again, you're going to see why we utilize those percentages when we get to the fund balance section and you see how we're going to utilize the reserve funds, it's all going to come together as one big picture, and hopefully by the time we're done describing it, you'll understand. Okay, let's move to slide 34 and we'll talk about the expenditure side. So again, just trying to cover some of the major categories without reading the slides to you. Obviously, as we talked about, the biggest category is paid claims, your hospitalization, your medical, surgical, pharmacy, currently administered by Excellus ProAct. And we actually do have a small portion of drugs through the Canna RX program. The other biggest factor is claims administration, administrative fees. Again, there's a pharmacy and a medical administrative fee. In 2024, it's going to move all to Excellus based on the resolution adopted today. And then there are two fees, taxes and fees that we still pay. We pay a New York State Covered Lives Assessment and a PCORI, a Federal Affordable Care Act called PCORI, which is Patient Center Outcome Research Institute, which is an organization that I think is supposed to be coming out with ideas and cutting edge. I personally haven't seen many reports from them. I could defer that to Brandon. You can meet him out in the lobby and ask him about that after the meeting. And then we have our stop loss cost, which is one of our other large charges. Again, we budget for a $600,000 premium deductible, excuse me, and we purchase $1 million deductible. Again, so we budget for the more expensive plan, and I'm going to show you this on the expenditure side, and we buy the cheaper plan. And then we cover that gap of claims between 500,000 and $1 million out of our catastrophic claims reserve. And then there's professional service, which are consultant fees, attorney fees, accountants, your Insero reports, internal fees covered by salaries and benefits for your support staff. Again, not minimizing them, but remember that piece really is 1.5% of your overall budget, which we're going to see in just a minute. So if we flip over to slide 36. There we go. Okay, starting on the left again is where we ended last year. Those are actual numbers from the audit report, and that's what we tie into. When you look at the projected budget, that's where we initially adopted the budget last September, October, and said this is our budget for the fiscal year prior to adding new members, the 9.6% additional contracts and covered lives. And then that's the amended budget. And this is where we run into a little bit of a situation. If you look what the projected budget was for medical claims, 43.19%. If you trended, we use trends, and I'll talk a little more about them. We typically, when we budget, we trend our medical claims at about 4.75%. And I'll explain why we do that in a little bit. And we typically trend our prescription drugs by 7.5%. So when we built the amended budget, we looked at where we were, we looked at our trend models, and we said, okay, and we got to add the new members. And we came up with a number of 43,150,000 roughly. Right now, we're on pace for about 43,740,000 in medical expenses. Not too bad. We're off by about $500,000. Not horrible for a group this size. The RX drugs are running really a little bit hot right now. And that's been a little bit of a tricky one for us the past 3 years. Again, not sure if it's a lot of mental health issues following COVID or what, but it's really been something we've been chasing for a couple years now and deserves a little bit of additional attention in the 24 budget. The amended budget was 18.7 million, and right now we're on pace for about 20.7 million through August. So we're projecting to finish about 10% over budget in prescription drugs for the year. When you look at the stop loss insurance, this is where I want to show you. If you look at the amended budget, the middle column, you're going to see the budget amount was $872,964. But you're going to see that our estimated actual is $321,000. Okay, so there's a big difference there. So that $500,000, that additional savings, we will move into the catastrophic claims reserve. This is an intentional over budget on that line item. Because what's going to happen if we move that $500,000 into that pool of money, and we have one claimant that goes over 500,000, but hits say 9,000 or 950,000, we're going to take that 450,000 out of the money and put it back into the budget to help soften that blow. Because remember, you won't get any stop loss reimbursements until that claimant goes over $1 million. So this is a way to kind of internally absorb that one large loss that doesn't hit the stop loss deductible. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So
Well, I think it's important to note too, that we've been doing this for 3 years now. And the consortium has basically gained a little over $1 million utilizing this strategy. So it's certainly been a huge win for the consortium, purchasing the higher deductible policy with the lower premium and setting aside that money and basically self-insuring that corridor between $500,000 and $1 million. It saved the consortium over $1 million in 3 years. So certainly a good strategy that was enacted by the group a couple of years ago.
Okay, so I know I'm bouncing around a little bit on this slide, but let's go back one slide for a second, Terry. I just do want to point out two more items. One may look at the medical admin fee and see that our estimated actual this year is 1.7 million, and why the heck is it going down to 1.3 million? Is it that much of a savings going to Excelis? The answer is no, but part of their proposal for next year is on the medical side of administrative fees. They've given us a 2-month holiday. I'll call it a signing bonus or whatever. It's a signing bonus for your an incentive to go. But with that, if you look at the second line called advanced deposit, what Excelis requires in their contract is for us to fully fund 1 week of claims in advance. Well, why do they do that? Well, they're a huge organization. If you think about all the insureds over the whole United States, they have to pay claims, then they bill us for the claims, and then we reimburse them. So what this does is that gives them a pot of money up front, and they're able to pay the claims and have the monies to do that until they bill us, and then we reimburse them. That's an asset that remains with the cooperative. But again, it's something that's going to go up. And so why is it going up so much? Well, we're adding the RX side to their side of business. So right now, our advanced deposit is based on only the medical claims, but since it's all going to be under one roof, we're going to have that one-time adjustment to the advanced deposit line. Okay. Now we go to slide 37. And again, I put it up there in yellow, and I just want to be very careful not to minimize this, because this side of the paper is important. It's the people that run the program, and it also, they run it, as I said, a lot, and I don't mean to overwhelm or overstate it, but it's so efficient. I mean, with a limited staff working with 64, 65 municipalities, the amount of questions that come in, I mean, the internal staff does a wonderful job. So I hope you're experiencing the same. It's been a pleasure for Losi and Cahill to work with the staff and with the leadership of the group. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's not a lot of the money. The real nuts and bolts of the premium increases built into the claims, the stop loss insurance, the administrative fees, but a very important part of your budget. And you'll see the bottom line for 2024, the projected budget, 72,013. You're going to probably recognize if you looked at the revenue line wasn't 72 million. It was about $1 million less than that. We'll explain that in a little bit. Your next two slides are those 4 out years. I don't want you to spend a lot of time on them, but I do want you to know that, again, we don't just project on the revenue side, we project on the expenditure side. We trend the claims out 4 years. What happens if our trend holds? Do we have to adjust that trend? And bottom line is, if you look at slide 39, in 2028, we're looking at about a $90 million organization. Okay, and that's before adding new members. Remember, we haven't added the new groups that we just approved for tonight. So that number is going to grow. So there's probably a good chance by 2028, well over $100 million organization. So let's look at that in a little more condensed version. And this just has the last year audit year, this year's budget, amended budget, and estimated actual, and next year's budget to show you where we are on one page. On the right side, you're going to see that we're projecting about $71 million in revenues and just over $72 million in expenditures. On the expenditure side, remember those top 4 lines, about 98.5% of the overall budget expenditures. So you're going to wonder how that's going to work with reserve funds, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But first of all, I want to explain how we use our trends and how we project our claims, because again, that really is the main focus of this budget, and what drives the premium rate increase is the claims. Go to slide 41, please. If you look at Greater Tompkins County, right now their medical claims are trending at about 4.52% from 2011 to current, and their RX claims are about 6.45%. Our whole book of business is running about 4.14%, and we handle, is it 8 municipal or cooperative school districts, everything, 8 or 9? So you put all of our groups together, and you're going to see what that whole population is doing. There's not a huge variance, but a little bit. On the medical side, 4.14, and on the pharmacy side, 4.3. So as we talked about, we use 4.75, a little conservative, a little above the 4.5, and we use 7.5 for the RX, a little conservative, above the 6.5% for Greater Tompkins County. But recognizing that this year is likely an anomaly, it's a cyclical thing. Every group has experienced this at one time or another. Greater Tompkins County is not the only group to experience a year with high claims. We softened it just a little bit. We trended it at 4.75, and then the medical claims, and we trended the RX at 7.5, but then we softened it just a touch for the 2024 budget. Again, the hope is this was an anomaly. You're not going to get stung with two tough years in a row. But if you go to the next slide, you're going to see what the trend line looks like. And this is Greater Tompkins County medical trend. Again, 4.52% roughly. The line, you have your JAGs up above the line, below the line, but on trend, on average, 4.52%. And when you flip to the next slide, you got the prescription drug for Greater Tompkins County. You're at 6.45%. And again, I mean, if you look at it, and it's kind of interesting, if you look at the far right side, you actually see all the dots are above the line, which is this year we're 10% over budget. So it's got that little bit of trend that's kind of rising a little bit. And so that's what we had to take a look at during this year's budget. And then just to give you a comparison on the next slide, this is our overall book of business put together. And there's your 4.14% on the medical claims. And just take a look at the highlighted zone. You'll see all the lines for medical only, really below the trend line. And that's where COVID, where people weren't going to the doctor as much and stuff. So we kind of got to take that into account also. And then you go to the next slide and you'll see how close to the line when you put our overall book of business, 7.4%. Okay. Let's move again. The pages I'm skipping, hopefully I've talked about. So let's go to slide 51. So this is where the 2023 budget targets were. And we're just going to give you those targets. We're going to talk about the reserve fund targets. Can you back up one, I think? Yeah, you're good. Where the budget target is for 2023, and then after we'll talk to you where the reserve fund targets are for 2024. When we built the 2023 budget, we had a target of the IBNR being, again, that's 12% of your expected claims, would have been about $7,038,000. At the year end of 2022, it was $6.67 million. So $7 million based on your budgeted claims. Obviously, I think that number is going to be a little higher because our claims are running high. So when the audit's done and everything, I think the IBNR is going to be a little higher than that as we close the books. Our surplus account. When we did the 2023 budget, 2.92 million. At the end of 2022, 2.7 million. Not a huge gap there, but again, this is 5% of your projected premium income. Catastrophic claims reserve at the end of December 2022 was 4.8 million. There's no set defined number, but again, the way we fund that reserve, we put in the surplus from the stop loss line by buying the cheaper policy. And then we take out of any claims between 500,000 and less than $1 million. We take that out. Also, what gets added back to that in all our reserve funds is the interest earning. Any interest earned on those reserve funds gets deposited right back into those reserve funds to protect their integrity. The rate stabilization reserve. This is fully funded now at 7.5%, but you're going to see that as part of this 8% recommendation, that we're actually going to draw that down to 2.5% for a few years to try to soften the premium increase, build it back up to 5 in a couple of years, up to 7.5 with the outlying target, probably outside of 4 years down the road of being 10%. But again, that's a target. It's not set in stone because we could have a fantastic year next year. We could finish up this year way closer to budget. I mean, 4 months is a lot of time. Today's claims number, like I said, was a great week. It was a good week based on budget numbers, a couple $100,000 this week under budget. We'll take that all day long. Slide 55. Again, you approved and accepted the 2022 audit. This just shows you those reserve funds in the audit report, knowing that our audit report, our financial report ties right into those. But it's more there to tie into the next slide, which is where we stand right now as of August 31st. Okay. Right now, year-to-date budget, we would have expected an ending balance, that's your top line, of about 28.483 million. Right now, we're sitting at about 27.5, so we're about 950,000 over budget or below budget performance than we anticipated. We're still fine, all our reserve funds fully funded down at the bottom. You'll see the Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield advanced deposit number in there, currently 928,000. Again, that's our money that's on their books. And then our unencumbered fund balance of 8.5 million, which is about 13.7% of premium income. That's a solid position. That's where you want to be. If the year ended like this, we'd be really happy. We got the 4 months left to go. So we're going to flip over to slide 57, and this is very busy, and I apologize for it, but we think for the long-term, long-range financial planning aspect of it, we think it was best to show us this way. You'll see on the left side, we start with the Insero audit numbers of where we ended, and the overall ending balance, 28.694 million. Work your way down with fully funded reserves, rate stabilization at 7.5%, and the undesignated fund balance of 19.4%. Let's go to 2 columns over to the amended budget. You're going to see our net income, net loss in the amended budget at this point in time of 1.395. We thought we'd be about 1.395 expenditures exceeding revenues at this point. And if you look at the projected estimated actual, based on the way trends are going with the claims right now, we are projecting that this year may show a deficit of about 3.4 million. There comes the tough decisions when you're setting premium income expectations for next year. How do we utilize the reserve funds? And I give credit to the group of the administration of knowing when you got to make those hard decisions to when to tap in those reserve funds and do that. Something that's a good working balance between utilization of reserves, fiscal responsibility, and doing something that's going to be good for the long term of the group. So what we've done there, if you look at the estimated actual, we anticipate being down about 3.4 million net income. So if you go to the reserve funds on the bottom, those are showing you a fully funded number right there. But what happens is our net income unencumbered balance target is down to 9%. So remember, our target's always 12%. It's a target. We want to be there. So our goal is to build budgets that will get that back up to 12% and still fully fund all of our reserve funds in case there's another tough year like this down the road. So when you look at the projected budget for 2024, the concept there was, okay, let's utilize a little more fund balance. Let's make it maybe a little tougher, but get better in the long term. So we wanted to stay at no higher than an 8% rate increase. With an 8% rate increase and claims trended as we spoke about, we're still projecting to utilize about $1 million in fund balance. We have some gains and losses in investments, and those are kind of inconsequential. A little bit of money exchange in hands to the good, to the bad. That's really just paper money, but it is on the audit report when you look at those. All of our investments, they come to at full market value, but during the audit, they get booked at market value at the current time. Our ending balance at the end of 24 is estimated to be 25,253,000. So what we've done down at the bottom, anytime you see red font in the rate stabilization reserve, that's showing that year it being funded at 2.5%. Okay, so what we've done, we decided for the next 3 years, if the financial plan played out exactly like this, we would be funding that reserve fund only at 2.5%. Again, all other reserve funds. And then you look at that bottom line, and you're going to see that the unencumbered balance slowly climbs, 10.95, a little dip, 10.4, but in year 3, we're back at 12.26. But that rate stabilization reserve fund is still at the 2.5%. Now remember, these are projected at top premium increases, 8%, 7.75, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Not set in stone. You shouldn't get upset about those today, but just know that we are looking at things long-term. It's not a one-year game. It's a long-term, long-haul situation. So we're trying to project out worst case scenario, work within the parameters of the new resolution that was adopted tonight, you know, between a 4 and 8% premium increase, rate stabilization reserve between 2.5 and 10. So when you look at 2027 and you see that in green font, that has moved that rate stabilization reserve back to 5%. So we're working our way back up towards fully funding the reserve. Our undesignated fund balance is at 12.2% roughly. And then in year 2028, you're gonna see the ending balance at 37 million. You're gonna say, wow, that's a huge growth in ending balance. But remember, your reserve funds are a product of a percentage times the claims. The claims are growing, so the number's gonna be bigger in the reserve fund. Or it's a product of percentage times your premium income. So your number is going to be bigger because the premium income number is getting bigger. But if you look at it, the total reserve funds in 2028, 25 million, and that's at 7.5% in the rate stabilization reserve, and your undesignated fund balance about 13.4%. That's the game plan to try to move back towards a strong, fully funded reserve funds. But something I want to bring your attention to, if you look at the ending balance, it's right above the reserve fund calculation, and something that's interesting. But remember, the program's growing. You're probably going to be over 100 million by 2028, but the ending balance in 2024, 25.2 million. The ending balance in 2025, 26.4. The ending balance in 26, 28.9, 32 million. We're growing, but it's just a product of how you're distributing that fund balance. We got it. We want to work those fund balances or those reserve funds back to being fully funded, but yet still hit that surplus undesignated fund balance for the emergency days. Ideally, we'd be able to fund it out of that. You have your two statutory reserve funds, the IBNR and the surplus. And these other two reserve funds, catastrophic and rate stabilization, it is important to know that they are discretionary. They're not mandated by law. It's a policy and a resolution put in place by this group. They can be changed by resolution. IBNR can't be changed. Surplus can't be changed. These two can be, but it's good, prudent financial plan, and kudos to the group for putting them in place and utilizing. So with that said, I'm not going to go through a lot of the recommendations at the end, but I do want to go, I mean, obviously the budget premium increase recommendation is 8%. The other recommendation is to utilize the rate stabilization reserve, bring it down to 2.5%, work it back up, slow, steady, and responsibly. But I think I do want to bring you to slide 63 if we can. This is what Riordan talked about earlier. This group has really experienced a substantial, a really sensational record. If you look in the early 2011, 2012, we were at 9.5%, 9.5%, 9.5%, or excuse me, 9%. But then when you look at from 2015 all the way down to 2022, we're between 5, 4, so 3 mixed in there. And even in 2020, when we had 5%, that doesn't take into account a premium holiday where we gave back basically $4.3 million to all the members. That was a COVID year. We had suppressed claims, and the group recognized and said, hey, you know what? We probably didn't need to collect that much money. Claims are way, way down. And they made the decision. Now, in high insight, when we're having a bad year like this, it would be kind of handy to have that 4.3 million on hand, but it was given back, and that's water and under the bridge, and that's a good thing that happened that year. So we're looking at 8% proposed this year, and then the next year's, those are all projected again, so don't get hung up on the outline years, 8% proposed. But when you look at the bottom in the circled numbers, from 2011 to 28, 6.54%, and 2019 to 28, we're looking at 6.48% average. If you look over on the right a little bit where it says Excellus Small Group Market, each year Excellus brings all their plans to the Department of Financial Service for approval for the rate increases. So this is an average of all the plans they submit, and the request on Excellus's part was 12.6%. August 31st, DFS approved 12% for them. So 8% sounds pretty good compared to 12%. At least where I stand, and on Los Cahill plan, they would like 8, or they would like 12. 12 would probably be great, wouldn't it?
12 would be better than 15.
So bronze plan, 15% in our home office. But the next slide kind of really summarizes where that process goes, how Greater Tompkins has stacked up over these last years from 2017 compared to Excellus. Again, I'm not 100% sure of the process of DFS, but I'm thinking they got to submit a justification. Why do you think we need to raise premium income by this much? Well, the cost of medical services are going up by this much, and in order to cover that. So that type of discussion and proof and documentation has to be going on between Excellus and Department of Financial Services. If you look at the last few years, I think we're Department of Financial Services, quite frankly, I think they made a mistake in 2021. We're just coming out of COVID. Excellus asked them for 4.4, and they said, no, 0.9. Probably because claims were compressed a little bit. Not everybody was really getting back to the doctor yet. So I think the Department of Financial Services, no, we're not going to do it. Well, had they done a 5, maybe in the next few years, they wouldn't have approved an 8.7, a 9.4, and a 12%. I think that's where that resolution that you adopted tonight, keeping that premium increase between 4 and 8 is a solid game plan. And the good years take a little bit, so in the bad years, you don't have to take a lot. I just think it's a real solid game plan. In the highlight area over there in the blue, you see what Greater Tompkins done in those same years and what the variance is in the very right column. On average, Excellus has averaged 7.51%, Greater Tompkins 5.44%. So I think some of the numbers, they talk for themselves. I think a solid organization and run very well. With that said, there was a lot of talking and I'm apologizing, but if there's any questions regarding the financial numbers, whether you want to do it today, after the meeting, give me a call, give me an email. More than happy to answer any question I possibly may not have covered. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Steve. All right, folks, hang in there with me. We are on the home stretch. We have a number of important resolutions to pass, not the least of which is coming out of that presentation is our 2024 budget. So I'll quickly read this resolution into the record that whereas the Audit and Finance and Executive Committees have had detailed discussions and have considered the consortium's 2024 budget and premium rates, and whereas the Board of Directors has adopted a policy that provides guidance on targets for net income, fund balance, and both statutory and discretionary reserve levels, in addition to creating a mechanism by which excess net income fund balance can be returned to members. And whereas the 2024 proposed budget reflects the adopted budget guidelines as follows. It maintains the incurred but not reported claims reserve at 12% of total claims. It maintains the surplus account at 5% of the annual premium of the consortium in compliance with section 4706A5 of the New York State Insurance Law. It funds the rate stabilization reserve at a level less than the 10% of premium target, but not lower than 2.5% of premium. It sets the catastrophic claims reserve for 2023 beginning balance of 4.8. I won't read all of that, plus any earned interest and stop loss insurance premium savings between the $600,000 policy and $1 million policy costs in 2023, less any large claims between $500,000 and $1 million. If unencumbered fund balance goes less than 12% of expected premium, it will be returned to not less than 12% of expected premium by year 4. It sets the annual budget to accomplish a 0 to 2% net income level, and it increases premium revenue by 8% in 2024 across all benefit plans except for the silver and gold plans, which will see a premium revenue increase of 6.89% and 6.83% respectively. Now, therefore, be it resolved on recommendation of the Audit and Finance and Executive Committees that the consortium's attached 2024 budget, including premium equivalent rates and reserve amounts, are hereby adopted by the consortium board of directors. Would someone like to move that? Thanks, Ed. Is there a second? Get it. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ed, did you have any remarks on the nomination list? Coming out of the Nominations and Engagement Committee, we have resolutions for next year's slate of officers and committee membership. First resolution is very simple. That resolved on recommendation of the Nominations and Engagement Committee, the Board of Directors elects the following individuals to serve from January 1 of 2024 through December 31st, 2024 in the roles as follows. Yours truly as chair, Lisa Holmes as vice chair, whomever is the city controller of the city of Ithaca as our CFO, as outlined in our municipal cooperative agreement, and Peter Sultan as our secretary. Would someone like to move that? Gary, thank you. Would someone like to second? Thank you, Ronnie. Any questions or comments? I will simply restate my plug for the fact that at least 3 of the 4 people on this list will not be here in 10 years under any circumstances. And so in order to backfill these positions, we need folks who are interested in as dry as budgeting and insurance law can be. We need folks to move into this track, perhaps with a committee spot, which we'll discuss in a moment. So if there are no questions or comments, I'll call for a vote on next year's slate of officers. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, moving right along, we have a creation of our 2024 committee structure and appointment of their members. I will not read hopefully everyone has seen it. I will not read every name going into each committee, but I will note simply that the resolution states that the board of directors at its annual meeting establishes a committee structure and appoints its members. And that resolved upon the recommendation of the nominations and engagement committee, the executive committee, and on behalf of the board of directors, the following appointments are made. We have 13 spots on the executive committee. I'm again plugging anyone who would like to join any of these committees, as there are some vacancies. 13 spots on the executive committee. There are 5 filled spots on the audit committee. There are 9 spots on the finance committee. We have an operations committee with 10 members. We have the nominations and engagement committee with 5 members, the claims and appeals committee with 7 members, and the joint committee on plan structure and design, which is a committee of both labor and representatives from every single municipality. So if you're looking for an easy way to start to participate without committing to a whole lot of meetings, that might be an option. And so I would entertain a motion to accept the 2024 committee structure and members appointed thereto. Would someone like to move it? Thank you, Terry. Is there a second? Thanks, Kate. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? From the Claims and Appeals Committee, we don't have to vote on this. Okay, we just have an informational item from the Claims and Appeals Committee. The chair is Bud Shattuck, but he is at the NICOM fall meetings. This simply is informational to this board that we are once again using BMI as an auditing service. We've used them a number of years running to audit our actual prescription drug claims. They actually look at the claims, look how they were paid, make sure that we are paying what we should be paying and not paying what we shouldn't be paying. Kate, did you have anything you wanted to speak to on that? From the aforementioned Joint Committee on Plan Structure and Design, we do have 2 resolutions which need to be adopted by the Board of Directors. Not to get again too far out into the weeds on this, there was a question earlier about plan design relative to high cost claims. We are, particularly with the metal level plans, required to stay within certain guidelines with respect to how much of the premium or benefit, rather, how much of the benefit the user is paying versus how much the employer is paying. And there's a formula, and someone in Washington dreamed it up. And when we come outside of those, that range, then we're technically not compliant with what that plan is supposed to pay. So if Gold has a certain percentage breakdown between the employer payment and the employee payment, if it starts to drift, we have to correct it. That is the case coming into 2024 with the Gold and Silver high deductible plans. The way these are adjusted when we're on the high side, meaning the employer is paying quote unquote too much of a percentage as decided by the ACA. The way to correct that is by increasing the amount that the employee will pay, usually by increasing the deductible. So what we have are adjustments to the Silver and Gold deductible plans. Both of these adjustments will slightly increase both the in and out of network deductible to those users. I am not going to read both of these resolutions, although if there are questions on them, we can certainly entertain them. But I would entertain a motion to move both of these resolutions to accept the adjustments to the actuarial values of the Silver and Gold high deductible plans as presented, if someone would like to move that. Thank you, Ronnie. Do we have a second? Thanks, Mark. Any questions on this? It's about as wonky as health insurance gets. but is a requirement of the Affordable Care Act to make these adjustments.
I just a comment. The question in it, I think, maybe last year, the goal plan was adjusted. So so it's adjusted again, we expect that to happen every year, or is the goal plan vulnerable or vulnerable?
Steve can certainly answer this at a more granular level. My impression of seeing the adjustments, excuse me, is that relative to the other plans, we have fewer participants in the gold plan, although some municipalities are shifting in that direction. So when you have fewer participants, it's like if you have two people in an insurance pool, you have no idea what claims are going to look like and what the premiums are going to look like. If you have 2 million people in a pool, you can bank on some stability. So because the number of participants in that plan, in those plans are fewer than the full consortium or than in the platinum plan, it's vulnerable from the perspective that the employer actually ends up paying a little bit too much. The deductibles aren't as high as they should be as those plans adjust based on the claims experience of those particular folks. And so I wouldn't say that it's a trend that it's adjusting, but since we're just adjusting it just inside that upper cap, which is about where we are, then depending on the claims experience of those folks, it could just simply end up that they're not paying what DC says they should be paying.
So it's a smaller group, so you're more likely to.
Smaller sample size, yeah. Any other questions? Hearing none, then all in favor of approving the resolutions to adjust both the silver and gold high deductible plans, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? How many items of new business? The only item of new business is that you'll notice next year's annual meeting is TBD. It does appear that this week will be next year's NICOM fall meeting as well. So we're competing against them. So stay tuned for when that meeting may be. Probably will have to be the last week in September rather than the 3rd. I will simply say before we close, thank you again, everyone, for attending. Unless or until we get state insurance law changed to allow for these meetings to be virtual, we do need a quorum, particularly for this meeting, so we can adopt the budget. As always, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to Elin or members of the staff or myself, particularly on the municipal side of things. If questions come up from how do we balance wearing the elected cap versus storing up money for the consortium, and what's our long-term game plan, I'm always happy to answer those. So thank you again, everyone, for attending, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Everyone wants to adjourn. If there's no objection, we will stand adjourned, and thanks again, everyone.